Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, June 9, 2023. Justice Department Special Counsel Jack Smith speaks about the unsealing of the federal indictment of Donald Trump, former president and current presidential candidate. 37 felony charges related to Donald Trump mishandling confidential documents after he left office. Jack Smith saying our laws that protect national defense information are critical to the safety and security of the United States, and they must be enforced. Coming up, we'll hear Jack Smith's full statement, plus reaction to the indictment from Donald Trump and his now former lawyer, Jim Trusty, and Republican presidential candidate Mike Pence. We'll also talk about how the indictment impacts the race for the White House with Washington Post national politics reporter Hannah Knowles, and get reaction from some members of Congress, Democratic Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts, Republican Congressman James Comer of Kentucky. The White House says it is not commenting on this independent investigation and the indictment, but that did not stop the reporters' questions to President Biden and the Deputy Press Secretary Olivia Dalton. We'll have that as well. President Biden today traveling to Nash Community College in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, talking about jobs and the economy. And we'll hear from Republican Congresswoman Harriet Hageman of Wyoming about the importance of private land ownership. She was at the Western Conservative Summit in Denver. Associated Press reporting Donald Trump is facing 37 felony charges related to the mishandling of classified documents. An indictment unsealed Friday also alleges that he described a Pentagon plan of attack and shared a classified map related to a military operation. The document marks the Justice Department's first official confirmation of a criminal case against Donald Trump, arising from the retention of hundreds of documents at his Florida home, Mar-a-Lago. Charged alongside with Donald Trump was Walt Nauta, a Donald Trump aide who was seen on surveillance camera removing boxes at Mar-a-Lago. The indictment accuses Donald Trump of having improperly removed scores of boxes from the White House to take them to Mar-a-Lago, many of them containing the classified information. Some of the reporting from Associated Press. You can read the 49-page indictment posted at cspan.org. And this afternoon, Special Counsel Jack Smith with a statement at the Justice Department in Washington.
Good afternoon. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with felony violations of our national security laws, as well as participating in a conspiracy to obstruct justice. This indictment was voted by a grand jury of citizens in the Southern District of Florida, and I invite everyone to read it in full to understand the scope and the gravity of the crimes charged. The men and women of the United States intelligence community and our armed forces dedicate their lives to protecting our nation and its people. Our laws that protect national defense information are critical to the safety and security of the United States, and they must be enforced. Violations of those laws put our country at risk. Adherence to the rule of law is a bedrock principle of the Department of Justice, and our nation's commitment to the rule of law sets an example for the world. We have one set of laws in this country, and they apply to everyone. Applying those laws, collecting facts, that's what determines the outcome of an investigation. Nothing more and nothing less. The prosecutors in my office are among the most talented and experienced in the Department of Justice. They have investigated this case hewing to the highest ethical standards, and they will continue to do so as this case proceeds. It's very important for me to note that the defendants in this case must be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. To that end, my office will seek a speedy trial in this matter, consistent with the public interest and the rights of the accused. We very much look forward to presenting our case to a jury of citizens in the Southern District of Florida. In conclusion, I would like to thank the dedicated public servants of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, with whom my office is conducting this investigation and who work tirelessly every day upholding the rule of law in our country. I'm deeply proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. Thank you very much.
Why Florida, sir? Why did you decide to bring the case in Florida?
Special Counsel Jack Smith at the Justice Department this afternoon, not answering any reporters' questions. After the news of Donald Trump's federal indictment broke Thursday night, the former president and current presidential candidate posted a video. Here's a portion.
This is warfare for the law, and we can't let it happen. We can't let it happen. Our country is going to hell, and they come after Donald Trump, weaponizing the Justice Department, weaponizing the FBI. We can't let this continue to go on because it's ripping our country to shreds. We have such big problems, and this shouldn't be one of them. It's a hoax. The whole thing is a hoax, just like Russia, just like the fake dossier was a hoax. You saw the Durham report. You saw the Mueller report. It was all a big hoax. You had 2 impeachments, and they lost and we won. And we had tremendous support. But that was a hoax and a scam. And now they're doing it again. It's just a continuation, 7 years, even after I'm out. But it's called election interference. They're trying to destroy a reputation so they can win an election. That's just as bad as doing any of the other things that have been done over the last number of years, and especially during the 2020 election. So I just want to tell you, I'm an innocent man. I did nothing wrong. And we will fight this out just like we've been fighting for 7 years. It would be wonderful if we could devote our full time to making America great again. And that's exactly what we did. But now, again, our country is in decline. We're a failing nation. And this is what they do. I'm an innocent man. We will prove that again. 7 years of proving it. And here we go again. Very unfair. But that's the way it is. I just want to thank everybody. We are doing something very special for our country. We're putting America first. I always put America first. And that's why we were in a position. Unfortunately, that position is no longer valid because they've done such a poor job. But we're in a position where we're going to make America great again. I'm innocent, and we will prove that very, very soundly and hopefully very quickly. Thank you very much.
Donald Trump, former president and 2024 Republican presidential candidate, posting that video Thursday night after news of the indictment was released by him in a social media post. The indictment was unsealed today. More from the Associated Press article about the contents. The indictment alleges Donald Trump kept classified documents in the bathroom and shower at his Florida estate, as well as various other locations that included a ballroom, storeroom, office, and bedroom. Prosecutors noted that tens of thousands of members and guests visited the active social club of Mar-a-Lago between the end of Donald Trump's presidency in January 2021 through the August 2022 search. They argued that nonetheless, Donald Trump stored documents in a ballroom, a bathroom, a shower, office space, his bedroom, and a storage room. The indictment claims that for a 2-month period, some of Donald Trump's boxes were stored in one of Mar-a-Lago's gilded ballrooms. The indictment also shows a photograph of boxes that spilled over in the storage room, including a document marked Secret REL to USA FVEY, which means information releasable only to members of the Intelligence Alliance of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and the United States. In the photo, the classified document is redacted. Some of the reporting from the Associated Press. This from the New York Times today. 2 of former President Donald Trump's lawyers who had been engaging directly with the Justice Department have left the team, according to a social media post by Mr. Trump and a statement from the lawyers. The lawyers, James Trusty and John Rowley, left Mr. Trump's legal team a day after he was indicted on the counts related to the handling of government documents at his Florida home. In that post, Mr. Trump wrote, "For purposes of fighting the greatest witch hunt of all time, now moving to the Florida courts, I will be represented by Todd Blanche, Esquire, and a firm to be named later. I want to thank Jim Trusty and John Rowley for their work, but they were up against a very dishonest, corrupt, evil, and sick group of people, the likes of which has not been seen before. We will be announcing additional lawyers in the coming days." That post from Donald Trump today, as reported by the New York Times. Jim Trusty was on NBC News' Today Show this morning before he left the team.
You're his lawyer, so obviously you're going to maintain his innocence, but Jim, I think a lot of folks have a hard time understanding how the president can maintain he did nothing wrong when the fact of the matter is that the president had documents at his home that were classified. As we understand it, there was a subpoena issued to turn over those documents. In August of last year, the lawyer maintains that all the documents were overturned. The FBI then shows up at Mar-a-Lago and finds roughly 100 classified documents. How can the president maintain he did nothing wrong?
Yeah, well, the starting point is up until the Presidential Records Act, any former president could possess anything they want. I mean, that was just kind of the nature of the business. We've entrusted them under the Constitution with the nation's secrets. So if they want to keep stuff, they can keep it. The PRA, the Presidential Records Act, kicked in because of Richard Nixon. And what it anticipates is nothing criminal. There's no criminal statute within the Presidential Records Act that says it's a violation to possess any of these things, even the most sensitive documents. What they say is the world is presidential or personal, and the president, of all people, the former president, makes the call. If the archivist disagrees, it doesn't turn into a criminal case. They can sue civilly in Washington, D.C. So the whole system anticipates that we've entrusted our former presidents with the nation's secrets, documentary or otherwise. Yeah. And if there is any sort of fight, it gets resolved civilly, not with raids, not with a leak campaign, not with what we've seen in this case.
Jim Trusty this morning on NBC's Today Show. Today he resigned as an attorney representing Donald Trump in this classified documents case. More from the Associated Press article about what's in the indictment, unsealed today. In July 2021, at Donald Trump's Bedminster, New Jersey golf course, the former president showed a writer, a publisher, and two of his staff members, none of whom had a security clearance, a plan of attack that had been prepared by the Defense Department and a senior military official. In the meeting, which prosecutors said was recorded on audio, Donald Trump told them the plan was highly confidential, and as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't, but this is still a secret. That from the Associated Press. Donald Trump is expected to be in court in Miami next week to answer the charges. C-SPAN spoke to Kimberly Whaley, former assistant U.S. attorney, about what to expect.
He's supposed to be in court on Tuesday, and this is typical for anyone who has been indicted or charged through another kind of document would be an information. An indictment comes specifically from a grand jury, and grand jurors are just regular people, your neighbors, your friends, that get called to sit and listen to evidence. Sometimes the grand jury just listens to evidence and doesn't do anything with it. It's just an investigative grand jury. It's there to just gather facts. Sometimes they're asked to actually make a charging determination, and that's apparently what happened here. Tuesday, Mr. Trump will at some point be formally arrested. I know that's a scary word, but we saw this happen with Alvin Bragg out of Manhattan. I'm sure his lawyers and the government are negotiating around that to be smooth, to happen sort of smoothly and without a whole lot of incident. He would be fingerprinted and booked, and then there'll be an initial hearing at which presumably he'd be arraigned. And what that means is he'll formally hear the charges. They'll be read to him. That's basic due process. You have to have notice of what the government says that you did wrong. And then he, through his counsel, will enter a plea, presumably not guilty. And then the judge, and I understand it's the same judge that issued the warrant to search Mar-a-Lago. It's a magistrate judge. That judge will talk to Trump's counsel about the conditions of his release between now and trial, and possibly, in addition, questions around confidentiality. Because one of the things here is this indictment, it sounds like it involves national security information, classified information. We don't know if it's actually listed in the indictment, but I'm sure there are sensitivities, not just around the fact that it's a former president, but around the subject matter of this case that is, classified information that really shouldn't be out in the public domain, even through the court system.
Kimberly Whaley, former assistant U.S. attorney and legal contributor to ABC News, joining C-SPAN on this morning's Washington Journal program. Republican presidential candidates reacting to the indictment of Donald Trump. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis tweeting, "The weaponization of federal law enforcement represents a mortal threat to a free society," and he questioned why the Justice Department was so zealous in its investigations of Donald Trump, but not of Hillary Clinton or Hunter Biden. Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina telling Fox News the charges are an example of a justice system where the scales are weighted. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, in a statement, the American people are exhausted by the prosecutorial overreach, double standards, and vendetta politics. And former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, who was previously called for Donald Trump to drop out of the race, saying Donald Trump's actions, from his willful disregard for the Constitution to his disrespect for the rule of law, should not define our nation or the Republican Party. This is a sad day for our country. Former Vice President Mike Pence, another Republican presidential candidate, the vice president who served under Donald Trump, today in a campaign speech in Derry, New Hampshire, also calling it a sad day.
We gather today here in New Hampshire on a sad day in America. The day after a former president of the United States faces an unprecedented indictment by a Justice Department run by the current President of the United States and a political rival. You know, after years of politicization at the Department of Justice that I lived through when I was your vice president, we watched the Department of Justice announce there would be no charges against Hillary Clinton, despite 33,000 emails that were destroyed, including classified documents in that campaign in 2016. And then 2.5 years, millions of documents, an inquiry in the so-called Russia hoax. The Durham investigation is now found with an independent review should never even have begun. We've learned through that process of FBI agents that were politically motivated, working to advance the Russian hoax every single day. And of course, we stand here today recalling the 2020 campaign and the collusion between big tech, big media, and even some at the FBI who actually had Hunter Biden's laptop, but still allowed the media in this country to suppress the truth in the days before the campaign. And then the slow walk of justice when it comes to President Biden and his family. As I said yesterday in Iowa, the news that broke last night, I had hoped it wouldn't come to this. I had hoped the Department of Justice would see its way clear to resolve these issues with the former president without moving forward with charges. And I'm deeply troubled to see this indictment move forward, believing that it will only further divide our nation at a time that American families are facing real hardship at home and real peril abroad. And it also troubles me, having represented America on the world stage, the message this sends to the wider world. We're the beacon of democracy, but we're also an emblem of justice in the world. So as much of the media begins its latest rush to judgment, I believe the leaders of this country and our party and those of us who aspire to lead would do well to remember first principles. First, let me be clear. No one is above the law. Secondly, it is important to note, from my years as your vice president and also my years serving on the International Relations Committee in the Congress of the United States, the handling of classified materials of the United States is a serious matter. That's why, after repeated discovery of classified materials in the personal residence of President Biden, dating all the way back to his days as vice president, I initiated a review of my own records at our Indiana residence. And we found a number of classified documents had been stored among my personal papers. We alerted the Department of Justice immediately. I took full responsibility. And I was pleased the Department of Justice concluded it was an innocent mistake, but it was a mistake. We must secure our nation's secrets. Thirdly, it's important for all of us to remember that no one knows the facts in this case. And as Americans, it's essential to remember that you are innocent until proven guilty. While much of the speculation rages on the airwaves of America, the former president, like every American, is entitled to the presumption of innocence. And thirdly, and finally, the American people have a right to know what's in that indictment, and they have a right to know today. The unprecedented indictment of a former president of the United States. It's not just a sad day, but it's a troubling day for millions of Americans. And it invites a divisiveness in this country that can only be answered with facts. This morning I called on the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, to unseal the indictment and stand before the press and the American people and explain the reasons for this unprecedented indictment of a former president of the United States.
Republican presidential candidate and former Vice President Mike Pence in Derry, New Hampshire. Hannah Knowles, national politics reporter for The Washington Post, joining us now to talk about the indictment of Donald Trump and its potential impact on the race for president. Thanks for being with us. How have other Republicans in the field been reacting?
There's been a real range. Some people like Chris Christie, for example, who's been really one of the more vocal critics of Trump, said, I want to wait to see what the facts are. And of course, we got a lot more of those facts today. A lot of people were curious how Ron DeSantis would respond. He's been polling the closest to Trump. And a lot of people think, if someone else besides Trump is going to win the nomination, it would be him. And he has really kind of tried to court Trump's base, and he has to be careful what he says about these things. And so he ended up just saying, I think that the federal government weaponization of federal government is a problem. And he kind of took that more supportive line too, without really weighing in on the actual substance of the case and what Trump has done here. And then you saw Asa Hutchinson, the former governor of Arkansas, was really the only one saying Trump should drop out of the race because of all these legal entanglements he's accumulating.
Have any of the other Republican candidates for president said, as Donald Trump has said himself, that he's innocent?
No, I don't think so. And I would have to double check that I'm up to date on everything, but it's really been more just kind of broad strokes. We stand against the weaponization of the federal government, and I think that they probably don't want to wade into the specifics here yet.
Asa Hutchinson spoke today to the Western Conservative Summit at Colorado Christian University and made no mention of Donald Trump's indictment. Mike Pence was in Derry, New Hampshire, spent almost 10 minutes in his speech. What have been the different approaches from the candidates on whether to talk or not talk about this?
Yeah, some candidates were sort of conspicuously silent on Thursday night. And, Ron DeSantis, he didn't weigh in immediately. And I really wondered if maybe he would sit this one out. Nikki Haley waited until today to weigh in. I think the differences has really been, I don't think anyone is super eager to talk about this except for people like, for example, Vivek Ramaswamy, who's kind of a more of a long shot candidate who's really kind of offered a lot of red meat to the conservative base. And he actually did say, I would come out and I would pardon Trump if I were elected. And I have not seen other candidates get on board with that yet.
We're talking with Hannah Knowles with The Washington Post. Donald Trump has been leading in most polls to win the Republican presidential nomination. What does yet another indictment do to his numbers?
That is a great question. We will see. I think that the conventional wisdom is that maybe he gets, at least a short-term bump from this. We saw after he was indicted in a case in New York earlier this year, that only kind of strengthened his position in the polls. And, he is the clear frontrunner. But at the same time, I think, a lot of Republicans think, at a certain point, this has got to be a hindrance to your ability to win re-election, right? And this plays into the argument that, DeSantis and other folks have been making that, we need a Republican who can win and who can, win states like Georgia, that Trump lost last time around. And these kinds of cases do not do him any favors with those moderate voters that he will eventually be competing for.
And you're joining us from North Carolina, where Donald Trump will be speaking tomorrow. What do we expect?
I think we should expect a lot of the same defiance he's shown in, every other case he's been accused in. He's also speaking in Georgia, so he'll have multiple opportunities to push back on this. He said, "I'm innocent and I'll prove it." But, when you look at the facts in the case as laid out by prosecutors, it's really, really kind of stark statements from, allegedly from Trump and the people around him. And it just feels like, this is a very dangerous case for him.
Hannah Knowles, national politics reporter for The Washington Post. Find her stories at WashingtonPost.com and on Twitter at KnowlesHannah. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And more reaction to the indictment of Donald Trump and the unsealing of the indictment today when Washington Today continues in a moment.
C-SPAN's Campaign 2024 coverage is your front row seat to the presidential election. Watch our coverage of the candidates on the campaign trail with announcements, meet and greets, speeches, and events to make up your own mind. Campaign 2024 on the C-SPAN networks. C-SPAN Now, our free mobile video app, or anytime online at cspan.org. C-SPAN, your unfiltered view of politics.
When citizens are truly informed, our republic thrives. Get informed straight from the source on C-SPAN. Unfiltered, unbiased, word for word. From the nation's capital to wherever you are. Because the opinion that matters the most is your own. This is what democracy looks like. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, which you can get as a podcast wherever you find your podcasts and on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. More on the federal indictment of former President Donald Trump in the classified documents investigation by the special counsel. Reaction from members of Congress. Senator Ed Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts, asked by a reporter at an unrelated event in Cambridge, Massachusetts today.
Yeah, there are now more counts against Donald Trump than a boxer in a losing match. Donald Trump stole documents violating the Espionage Act. He lied about it. He hid the documents. He obstructed the federal government's attempts to reclaim those documents. And the rule of law in the United States must apply. No one is above the law. We do not live in an autocracy where an individual leader can determine what he or she should be able to do separate from the laws which apply to everyone else. So this is a good day for the United States. President Trump is going to be indicted, but under a law which applies to everyone else, the espionage law, saying he cannot steal documents, hide them, he cannot lie about it, he cannot obstruct justice. So I think it is a good day for our country.
Despite the indictment got above him, the indictment hanging over him, it would appear he's still a viable candidate for the Republican nomination, given the popular supporting opinion to have in comparison to many other candidates that are running. What are your thoughts about that?
Unfortunately, MAGA Republicans do not believe that Donald Trump should have to abide by the laws which apply to every other American citizen. So this may actually strengthen him amongst the MAGA Republicans because they believe that what happened on January 6th was not a crime, did not violate the Constitution. So we'll have to live with that. But I think the American people in general believe that Donald Trump and every other president should abide by the laws which apply to every other citizen of our country. And that, at the end of the day, is why we have to trust the American people at the ballot box to ensure that Donald Trump does not win a second term.
That's That's Senator Ed Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts, in Cambridge, Massachusetts today. It was an event not specifically on this issue, but he took a couple of questions and a reporter asking about the Donald Trump indictment. Senator Dan Sullivan, Republican from Alaska, tweeting, "As I previously stated, the worst thing for our country is for Americans to start to believe that the Justice Department and FBI provide two tiers of justice, and that the indictment of a former president and current candidate for the White House is unprecedented and will almost certainly do lasting damage to our polarized nation." Congressman James Comer, Republican from Kentucky, chair of the Oversight and Accountability Committee, was interviewed on Newsmax today, and he refers to the FBI document that the committee just got a hold of containing a tip from an informant that claims that Joe Biden, years ago when he was vice president, was paid $5 million by an executive of a Ukrainian natural gas firm where his son Hunter Biden sat on the board. Here's Congressman Comer.
Well, I don't think it's any coincidence that the day that the House Oversight Committee has access to an FBI Form 1020 that suggests Joe Biden was involved in a bribery scheme, that the DOJ comes back and indicts Donald Trump. I mean, we've talked about this for over a year now, that the DOJ and the FBI has a two-tier system of justice. I can tell you with 100% confidence from what I've learned in dealing with the FBI and my Biden influence peddling investigation is that the FBI has investigated every possible thing and then some on Donald Trump, and they haven't investigated anything on Joe Biden. They've turned a complete blind eye to Joe Biden. Just look at the classified documents. Joe Biden mishandled classified documents much more severely than Donald Trump ever potentially misclassified documents, but yet we don't hear anything about this. So this is something that's a priority for Jim Jordan on the House Weaponization Committee to try to rein them in. You know, we've got to use the opportunity we're going to have in September to try to cut the budget to where we can get rid of the bureaucrats, the top level people at the FBI, and try to reform this agency and get back to where the American people have confidence in the FBI and DOJ again. Right now, they don't.
Congressman James Comer, Republican from Kentucky, chair of the Oversight and Accountability Committee, interviewed on Newsmax. Congressman Steve Cohen, Democrat from Tennessee, with this tweet, "Trump has been a grifter, liar, bully, and criminal his entire life, guilty as sin." Washington Examiner article reads, "The White House referred all questions regarding the indictment of former President Donald Trump to the Justice Department Friday and defended the integrity of the department amid criticism from the former president's supporters. A number of Republican lawmakers, including some of Donald Trump's own presidential primary foes, claim that the Biden administration was weaponizing the Justice Department to stop Donald Trump from running against Joe Biden in the 2024 election. White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary Olivia Dalton faced multiple questions on the topic during a Friday flight to North Carolina, but repeatedly declined to offer any comment." That reporting from Washington Examiner. Here is the exchange with Olivia Dalton and reporters on Air Force One.
Does the president have any reaction to the Trump indictment? And then secondly, does the president have confidence in Attorney General Garland and Jack Smith to oversee this case?
We are just not going to comment on this case and would refer you to the DOJ, which runs its criminal investigations independently.
Sorry, quickly, just to follow up on that, I know you don't want to comment on the case, but what does the White House tell Republican critics who are now increasingly saying the DOJ has become politicized?
Well, this is a president who respects the rule of law and has said that since day one. That's precisely why we're not commenting here. He believes in respecting the independence of the DOJ and protecting the integrity of their processes. And that's, again, why we'll leave it there.
I have a follow-up on that. What do you say to concerns that Trump indictment is bad for the U.S. reputation around the world?
The rule of law is a bedrock principle of our democracy, and we're going to respect that, and we're just not going to have comment on this today.
Olivia, Republicans are charging that the timing is suspicious on the indictment because of those Burisma FBI documents coming out the same day. Can you at least comment on whether there was any kind of coordination between the DOJ and the White House on the indictment?
Again, we're not going to comment on this. I will tell you, though, that and confirm, as we've said overnight, that the president Senior staff found out just like everybody else last night, no advance knowledge that this was coming, found out from news reports just like everybody else across America.
Are there preparations underway to respond to possible demonstrations around the indictment of the president?
Look, we're always prepared. I don't have anything specific to share with you on that. And truly beyond this, I just don't have any comment.
Have you been in touch with local authorities in Miami at all about?
I don't have anything to share specifically on this at this time.
The White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary Olivia Dalton taking reporters' questions on Air Force One. They're all traveling with the president from Washington to North Carolina today. President visiting Nash Community College in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. After his speech, a reporter asked him whether he had spoken to Attorney General Merrick Garland about the indictment of Donald Trump. President Biden says no, and that he will not speak to Merrick Garland about that.
Have you spoken to Attorney General Merrick Garland yet?
I've not spoken to him at all. I'm not going to speak to him. No comment on what happened.
Any concern about political violence?
Remember, you can read the federal indictment of former President Donald Trump at cspan.org. 37 felony counts on him, runs 49 pages. And you'll have a chance to voice your opinion about this on C-SPAN's Washington Journal morning program Saturday at 7 a.m. Eastern. Now back to President Biden and his speech at Nash Community College, Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Joining him, the First Lady Jill Biden. President talking about education, jobs, the economy, and the bills that have been passed and programs funded during his administration.
Jill, my wife, has taught in community college now for some years, and she has her doctorate as a professor there. And she has an expression. She says that, community colleges are the best kept secret in America. And then she goes on to say, and she's right, that any country that out-educates us will out-compete us. Any country that out-educates us will out-compete us. And we're in an incredible competition worldwide, economically, politically, and militarily. And this best-kept secret is not being kept secret much anymore. Just in this community, in the community colleges, in North Carolina, since 2021, private investors have invested $16 billion in community college. Private investors, $16 billion. That doesn't count the billions of dollars we're investing from the federal government and the programs we've had. The point is, these investments were made in good-paying jobs all across North Carolina, not just here. Let's remember where we were just a few years ago. And when I took office, the economy was reeling. We were in tough shape. Unemployment was extremely high. And across the country, the pandemic had hit us very hard. Millions were out of work, and I'm not hyperbole. Millions were out of work. But the problems we were facing started a lot earlier than that. For decades before the last administration, Democrat and Republican, the middle class and working class folks, families I come from, were being hollowed out. Too many good-paying manufacturing jobs were moved overseas. Why? Because they're cheaper labor. So we started, instead of sending product overseas, we sent people, our jobs overseas. And they'd send product back to us. And factories closing down all over America. I look at a few guys in the audience who go back a little bit may remember what it does when a community has a factory that's working where you had 1,000, 700, or 2,000 people working, and all of a sudden it closes down. The community loses its heart. It just is is devastated. What to do? How many people in North Carolina, my home state of Delaware, and around the country, have had to walk up to mom and dad and say, "Mom, I got a good high school education, but I got to leave. There's no jobs. There's nothing here." Well, guess what? It's coming back. It's coming back big time. No, it really is.
President Biden at Nash Community College in Rocky Mount, North Carolina today. The News and Observer newspaper writes that President Joe Biden isn't letting the Republican Party have all the fun in North Carolina this week, as the state GOP convention brings politicians like former President Donald Trump, former Vice President Mike Pence, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to Greensboro. President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden spending their Friday touring eastern North Carolina. The Bidens stopped in Rocky Mount on their way to Fort Liberty, discussing two initiatives to help service members and young adults looking for good-paying jobs. That from the News and Observer. A different perspective on the role of the government in promoting economic growth and prosperity at the Western Conservative Summit at the Centennial Institute at Colorado Christian University in Denver. Congresswoman Harriet Hageman, Republican from Wyoming, talking about land ownership.
The people who are attacking us and our way of life, well, they live by a code as well. It's an extreme code based on extreme ideology. The leftist view of the world that a centralized government effectively owns everyone and everything that exists under it. It is made up of coastal elites, the progressives, the unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., and the agencies who believe that they should be able to tell our cowboys, our business owners, our families, and our communities what they should be doing. That we must do it either do it their way, regardless of whether their way makes any sense or would even work. You know, I have watched Yellowstone a couple of times, and there are a couple of observations that I have made. For one, when they watch Kevin Costner in that show, I think they kind of want to be like him. Not necessarily because he's a cowboy, but because he's ruthless, he's brutal, and he's a massive landowner. And that's just what the federal government in D.C. has become, a ruthless, brutal, massive landowner willing to do anything to amass more power in order to diminish our rights. Let's just put a fine point on it. The United States federal government is too big and owns too much land, far too much. Nationally, the federal government owns more than a quarter of all the real property in this country. It's actually over 27%. In the state of Wyoming alone, the feds claim nearly half, 46.7% to be exact. There are other western states that are similarly situated and some that have it even worse. In Nevada, it's almost 80%. Utah, 63.1%. Arizona, 38.6%. And right here in this state, 36.2%. Those are astonishing numbers. But what makes it even worse is that according to the bureaucrats in D.C., it's not enough. They want to control even more. The federal government is never satisfied, knowing that our God-given private property rights are what protect us from tyranny. I long have said that if you cannot own property, you are property.
Congresswoman Harriet Hageman, Republican from Wyoming, in Denver, Colorado, at the Western Conservative Summit hosted by Colorado Christian University. Wall Street today, the Dow up 43, NASDAQ up 20, S&P up 4. The 12th Biennial Walter Cronkite Awards for Excellence in TV Political Journalism were given out today by the USC Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism. One of the winners was an ABC News Nightline episode titled Threat to Democracy, about election workers finding themselves the targets of citizens upset at the way elections are being run. Correspondent on that story is Terry Moran. He accepted the award.
Thanks to Annenberg and USC, and we accept this on behalf of our team, our can-do, brave team that did so much. I must say, I personally feel humbled up here with the other journalists that you've recognized. And I'd also say that I love this story. I love doing this story. I love doing it with this team, and I loved meeting the people we did. Shay and Ruby and the others, election workers that we met in Colorado and Arizona and elsewhere, in a crazy and dark time, as others have said, stepped up, showed up, and helped us have a free and fair election in the teeth of death threats, in the teeth of hatred in their own neighborhoods. The county clerk in Colorado we met, who had to wear a bulletproof vest to work every day on the advice of the sheriff of the town, take a different route to work every day because of the threats he was receiving. So we felt that terror that had descended in this crazy time on people, but we also felt their pride, their courage, and their happiness at doing what they were doing. These ordinary people, as others have said, who make our democracy work. We've all got a role, each one of us, as citizens and as reporters, in making American democracy work. And in the dark time, there was a real ray of hope in here. Not just the bravery of the people who didn't sign up to be brave, but found it in themselves to do their job in that election. But also, we met several people who were election deniers, doubters and deniers, and who went to work as election workers or were hired by that county clerk in Colorado to get a look at where the corruption was. And they, to a person, said, I see. It can't be fixed. It can't be rigged. And just like every other election worker out there, went to work with pride and happiness, and in that I did find a ray of hope in the darkness, that people will still do this, despite everything. And that spirit, that American spirit, to guard the treasure of our elections, that's going to get us through, I think. Thank you very much.
ABC News correspondent Terry Moran accepting the award at this year's Walter Cronkite Awards for Excellence in TV Political Journalism from the USC Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism. In announcing all the winners back in April, the school wrote, despite the big lies, dispiriting tenacity, despite the disinformation at scale that AI's advances may portend, some of the best journalists on TV are digging for truth, combating deception, and defending democracy. That is the message sent by the work of the winners of the Cronkite Awards this year. You can find the full awards ceremony at our video library at cspan.org. And thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word to get the stories Washington is talking about sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.